Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today, I want to speak about some issues in practical halacha concerning eating out in a place without hashgacha. Uh, there are times if people are traveling, if you are at a business meeting, or sometimes with members of a family who may not keep kosher. There are situations where you might find yourself uh, having to eat in a restaurant or having that is not under hashgacha. And what are some of the issues there? Obviously, we should try whenever possible uh, to eat in a kosher establishment. That goes without saying. But what are the issues concerning eating out in a place without hashgacha? For a snack, a cup of coffee, uh, salad. What are some of the issues? So there are basically a half a dozen halachic issues that I'd like to run through. The first issue is simply called maras ayin. Maras ayin is a rabbinic prohibition against doing things that might be permissible, but might appear to be in violation of the halacha. And the reason that there's a prohibition is because somebody who's seeing you might think that you're doing something wrong or inappropriate or contrary to halacha. I guess it's a halacha that tries to satisfy religious society's expectations, if you will. And maras ayin sometimes is legitimate, sometimes it may go overboard, but clearly people shouldn't assume that something that is prohibited might be permissible. And not only that, but if the person who is seen doing something questionable is a prominent person, then you might add on to that the issue of Chilul Hashem. So, for example, the Gemara in Shabbos talks about somebody who fell into the water. He tripped, fell into the water, and his clothing is wet. And he's allowed to walk in the wet clothing because when he gets home, he's going to lay it out. He's not going to throw it in the dryer, obviously, but he's going to lay it out to dry. And people wouldn't suspect that he's going to launder them on Shabbos. Based on that Gemara, you have the issue of maras ayin comes out because somebody who sees somebody with wet clothing, they're going to assume that he's going to throw him in a dryer or do something inappropriate. There's a whole discussion there in the Gemara. Basically, maras ayin is when you suspect somebody incorrectly. I mean, the person's not doing anything wrong. It just looks like something might be inappropriate. So maras ayin, again, is a machlokus whether it applies in private as well as in public. But clearly, Rav Moshe Feinstein addresses this issue about going into a non-kosher restaurant, and he prohibits it because of maras ayin. They see somebody going in, and they think that they might be going there to eat something unkosher. Clearly, if there's a great need, for example, there's a whole discussion, can you go into a McDonald's to use their bathroom? Now, again, if people see you going in there and know who you are, they would not suspect that you're going to eat something unkosher. Ordering a cup of coffee at McDonald's, we'll get to in a moment. But so maras ayin is one stringency that perhaps we have to be concerned. Okay, stringency or issue. The next issue. So where are we now? Yeah, the next issue is a more basic issue, which is bishul akum. You're not allowed to eat anything that is cooked by a non-Jew, and the food that is cooked by a non-Jew has to be substantial. Something that, as what the Gemara says, is ola al shulchan malachim. We're not talking about snacks. We're talking about real food, things that aren't eaten raw, things that are served at a regular dinner. Again, the prohibition of bishul akum originally was because we're worried about intermarriage. Clearly, there's a whole machlokes as to which foods fall into the category of bishul akum. But clearly, for example, in most restaurants, especially Chinese restaurants, for example, you have non-Jewish people doing the cooking. So how do we get around that? So the way we get around that is to have a Jewish person turn on the gas range or the ovens, which not everybody is in favor of. I remember we had shortly after the Chinese restaurant came to Fairlawn, Rav Herschel Schechter was here giving a speech on some topic, and it came up in the discussion, and he said, "I don't understand how any Chinese restaurant can have a hechsher because of the fact that even though a Jew turned on the stove, and Rabbi Uden was turning all different shades of white and green in the back, as Rav Herschel was saying that, but clearly." Bishul Akum is an issue. Now, nobody who is an observant Jew is going to go into a non-kosher restaurant and order a cooked meal. That's pretty clear. Does tea and coffee fall into that category? No, it's not Bishul Akum because tea and coffee are beverages that are not considered choshev in that regard. They're not important in a halakhic sense. So that from the Bishul Akum point, it's not considered a problem. However, there are other reasons about, for example, the cup in which the coffee or tea is served. If it's a porcelain cup or even a glass, was it toveld? Was it washed with non-kosher food? These are all concerns. If you order a cup of coffee and a cup of tea in a paper cup, it's less of a problem. And that might be the only way that you could order a cup of coffee or tea in a non-kosher restaurant. But I remember many years ago, Rav Weiss, one of my Rebbeim, was giving a shiur, and he was thirsty. He's got a dry throat. So he sends one of the boys to the office and says, "Please get me a glass of water." And as the fellow was going out the door, he says, "And make sure it's in a paper cup." Because in all probability, the cup that he'd bring it in wasn't toveld properly. Considering he was chosher at the office staff, whatever. But these are issues. These are issues that we should be concerned about. The next problem, let's assume that you're ordering something that is not cooked or something that is permissible, like a salad or a fruit plate or whatever. But the plates and the utensils that are used are all washed with non-kosher pots and pans. Again, you could say halachically, if something is not a ben yomo, if it wasn't used in 24 hours, there are heterim. But clearly, a restaurant is using these things all the time. So the pots and pans are an issue, and it's a concern for those who might think I'm ordering something cold or a salad or a fruit, that it's not an issue. But clearly, even if the food is not cooked, nevertheless, the dishes that you're eating it on and the cutlery that you're using, in all probability, were used with real treifus or non-kosher food, and it could be a problem. What about cold? Yes.
When we were young, people used to wash dishes with non-kosher soap.
Yes.
Because unless you got the Rokeach soap, all the liquid soaps were not kosher.
Okay, so the only heter that you have there is because these are things that are non-edible items. And there's a soap is the amount of non-kosher glycerin or what have you in the soap was rendered inedible by the other compounds in the soap. It's clearly a b'diavad, position, and certainly not l'chatchila. There are many things that people did when we were growing up that people would never do today. Before you had the kashrus organizations as widespread as they are today, people would look at a box of crackers, and if it said pure vegetable shortening, not just vegetable shortening, but pure vegetable shortening, people would say, okay, I can eat these crackers, even though it doesn't have a hashgacha, because you didn't have all that many products with hashgachas. And the OU proliferated, and all the other groups came on the scene. But clearly, 50, 60 years ago, the kashrus scene was very, very different. And what some people did, the expression goes, they were more heter liatzman. They paskined for themselves that they could do this. And it may have been problematic, but they had no choice. Clearly, today we have many, many more options. So what people did then, you could find, you could fetch out a heter because it was nifsal mechilas kelev and it was rendered inedible. So it's not a problem. I mean, not a major problem, put it that way. We did things, so it doesn't mean it was always right that we did. Let's talk about ordering a salad or a fruit plate. I know I used to go out with a prominent rabbi, and he would go out to eat. And if we happened to be in a hotel dining room, so he would order cottage cheese and a half a grapefruit. That was his standard go-to meal if he was eating in a non-kosher restaurant. And it's even that might be a problem. I remember years ago when I worked at Federation, so they had the annual conference of all the federations in North America, and for many, many years they were not kosher. Starting in the I would say early 70s, they began to become strictly kosher. Fine. We had the annual conference in New Orleans, and the group that I was with said, how can we be in New Orleans if we don't go to this famous, I forget, French restaurant, which was Glat Treif? So they went. I had to go with them. Nothing there I could eat. So I went. I said to the waiter, can I have a baked potato? He says, certainly, but it'll take 45 minutes. So why can't you just pop it in the microwave? He says, monsieur, at this restaurant, we don't use a microwave. And so I didn't, I had, I think I had an orange for supper. And later on, I went out for ice cream. But it's a problem sometimes. Raw fruit platter, or a vegetable salad. You'd think it might not be a problem, except you have the knife and the plates and the cutlery. There's something called, well, two issues. One is if your salad has onions in it or garlic, which are considered sharp foods. In terms of Yoredeya, it's problematic. And the knives or the cutlery that's being used, there's something called duchka de sakina. The sharp edge of the knife is worse than simply using non-kosher cutlery. You could find lenient opinions for a spoon or a fork, perhaps, but a sharp knife that was used to cut onions is a problem. That's problem number one. Problem number two is the salad dressing that you might use. If it has plain olive oil or pure vegetable oil, that might be okay. But vinegar is very often wine vinegar, which falls under the category of non-kosher wines. So there are a lot of issues, even ordering a fruit salad or a vegetable salad, assuming that there's no fish in the salad or pieces of meat and so forth. So these are all issues to be concerned about. Next category. Let's assume you have a vegetarian restaurant, 100% vegetarian. Even in a vegetarian restaurant, there could be problems. For example, margarine, according to law, can contain less than 2% of animal fat. It's not listed because it's a minimal amount. But nevertheless, some of the things that you have in vegetarian restaurants, they may use wine in their cooking. They may have certain cheeses, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. These are, and of course, the issue of bishul akum comes up again as well. So vegetarian restaurants that don't have a hashgacha could be problematic. So all of these issues are, I guess, militate against eating out in non-kosher restaurants. You could find certain lenient opinions if you have to, but again, is the issue of maris ayin, bishul akum, non-kosher pots and pans, the issues of the kalim, even cold foods and so forth. All of these issues are serious enough. Yoredeya is the section that deals with what machalos asuros, what you can and cannot eat. And today's restaurants use tremendous amounts of processed foods. And not a lot of these processed foods are not under hashgacha. In a kosher restaurant, obviously they are. And the mashgiach's job is to check every product that comes in with it, whether it's kosher or not. Sometimes there have been documented cases where a chef, even in a kosher restaurant, he has a certain signature dish, and he might want to use a certain ingredient that might not be kosher and try to sneak it in. And that has happened sometimes, because after all, he's a chef. He's proud of his signature dish, whatever it might be. But we have to be careful. We assume that restaurants under hashgacha are not problematic. Eating out, as I say, if you find yourself in that situation, you try to minimize some of the issues. I said a baked potato is a minimal issue. If it isn't difficult to use plastic cutlery, that's what you should use. Coffee and tea, preferably in a paper cup. So these are things to be aware of. Fortunately, we live in a time where there is no shortage of kosher places to eat. And you can travel almost anywhere in the country today and either find kosher products or a restaurant or a store that sells them. But practical halacha, these are concerns that people should have, because we all might find ourselves in that situation at one time or another where we can't control where we eat. So we try to minimize some of the halachic issues to try to consume foods where there are little or no halachic considerations. The maris ayin situation I can't help, but all the other things we can take care of. The bishul akum, pots and pans, cold foods, we can work around that if we are very careful to watch out for some of the problematic issues.
Rabbi,
yes, shoot.
does coffee have to be black if you're eating in a picking it up at a non-textured location?
Yeah. Again, going on a limb here, I would say no. There are those who would say you have to have chalav Yisrael, but clearly, in America today, chalav Yisrael is only a chumrah. All milk today is cow's milk, so we don't have the problem I used to have of mixing, pig milk or other animal milk in with it on the farm in Europe. But today in America, you can drink any kind of milk. You don't need chalav Yisrael or cream or half and half. So you don't have to have just black coffee. Not a problem.
There's no. Is there an issue with if you're not getting any of these fancy coffees, but like plain old non-kosher kosher restaurant that have the glass teapot and coffee pot? Those things get washed with who knows what.
That's correct. So that again, it is problematic. You can dray around and find different heterim to allow you to do it, but it's preferable not to do that. But if you find yourself in that situation, there are ways around it. in terms of the minimum amount. I mean, the fact that a carafe of coffee pot might be washed with other dishes, bear in mind that generally speaking, they don't mix dishes with glassware. So that might be a tzad kula in that regard, because glass can get broken very easily. So usually coffee pots are rinsed out or washed separately from the regular pots and pans. So that would be a less of a problem there. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then. This is just a few aspects of practical halacha of eating out. Today, there is no shortage of kosher eating establishments. And unless you find yourself there at a business meeting or at some other situation, or if you're way, way out of town someplace and you're stopping along the highway for a cup of coffee, that's where you can apply some of these heterim. But lechatchila, we should always try to eat in a place that has a hashgacha. The halacha is very, very, I wouldn't say elastic, but there are conditions under which you can allow certain things, in a bidi evid, after the fact type of thing. Lechatchila, you shouldn't eat in a non-kosher restaurant. However, by combining different types of kulas, the material that's being used, how it's being used, how often it's being used, there are a lot of ways that the halacha allows for ex post facto heterim for doing something that you wouldn't ordinarily do lechatchila, put it that way. But clearly, yes. Question there? Okay.
No shortages, yeah, no shortages. Baruch Hashem. I said no shortages. All puns intended. Baruch Hashem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Questions, critiques, comments? Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good day. Eat kosher.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wally, you said you're teaching tomorrow as well?
Yes, tomorrow morning. Yeah, same time.
Same time, same station.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll see you then.
You messed me up. Today is Tuesday, not Wednesday.
I know.
I should send out the same topic for tomorrow.
Yes, I have. I'll send it to you.
Okay, thanks.
You got
Take
it.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Yeah.